And welcome back to coverage here of the 2020 season grand finals. Marshall Sutcliffe with Paul Cheon. Paul, it is the last round of the day. Today we're in standard, and in the feature, we've got undefeated Autumn Burchett looking to stay that way against yet another competitor trying to show up and beat Autumn and their Gruul deck. This is Eetu Perttula playing Omnath Adventures. Take a look at Eetu there. Oh, sweet. Look at that Black Lotus in the background. Nice.
His backdrop game is on point.
Definitely. All right. Well, this is going to be Omnath Adventures versus Gruul Beats. Look, I think you could make arguments for either way, for choosing either deck for the tournament. Most players chose to go the route of Omnath. Why would you go the route of Gruul if you did end up choosing that, like Autumn did?
So there's several reasons. There are often times where people already know what the defined metagame is and maybe might not necessarily want to play the mirror. That is one reason. Additionally, this is a deck that's very proactive. If you like to just attack, this seems to be one of the best aggressive decks in the format. It's currently got a 5-1 record between the three people who have chosen to play this deck. And and finally, playing a deck that's kind of under the radar, there is value. I mean, this is kind of, there haven't been a ton of high impact standard events just yet. And so standard is still being figured out. People are still trying to figure out what the strongest thing to do outside of course, Omnath is. And in that world, playing against kind of a deck that people don't really know how to play against, there is value there too.
Potentially awkward opener here for Autumn with the lands. They decided to play that Mammoth as a land tapped rather than saving it for a creature later on, and also giving up the opportunity to get an Edgewall Innkeeper on the battlefield straight away. But this has worked out well for Autumn, as they're going to be able to use Stomp to kill the very, very important Lotus Cobra that Perttula just put out.
Yeah, and Eetu really needs a land here. Oh no, because yeah, that Beanstalk Giant will basically be able to unlock his hand, especially if he finds a non-forest or mountain to draw for his land, so that he can basically get the 4th mana source for Omnath. But if he doesn't find it this turn, he's going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, the good news from Eetu's perspective is if the best thing that Autumn does this turn is play a 3/3, at least it's not killing you like immediately.
Right.
Ooh, there's a land off the top. It was even a 3rd color here, Paul. It was an island.
Yeah, no, that is huge. So now he can go Beanstalk Giant, get the plains, and then next turn, cast the Omnath. And with 2 draw steps, very likely to be able to find a follow-up land to play that turn to be able to kind of pad that life total. Ideally, of course, he's looking for something like a Fabled Passage, because, of course, that would allow him to play that Escape to the Wilds in his hand. But I think he'd be happy with any land at this point.
Yeah, Fabled Passage would be a nice one, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So first things first, Autumn's going to just attack in here for 3, and now they're going to have to make some decisions about how to progress.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking probably Edgewall Innkeeper into Bone Crusher Giant. But if they're interested in just putting maximum power on the battlefield, I could also see an argument made for maybe for example, just making a token off the Lovestruck Beast and then casting it, or play Edgewall Innkeeper and then play Lovestruck Beast. Of course, that leaves you a little bit more vulnerable to a removal spell, right? Because if you do play Edgewall Innkeeper into Lovestruck Beast, if Eetu does find a way to kill the Innkeeper, he will not be able to attack with Lovestruck Beast.
Of course, either of these plays, whether going Heart's Desire, Lovestruck Beast, or the play that Autumn ultimately made, which was Edgewall Innkeeper into Bone Crusher, is setting up for the cleave, Ember Cleave in hand here for Autumn Burchett. Looking very scary. Here comes Omnath, and was there a land? Yes, but it's a tap land. And
unless this is
an untapped land. Ooh, that was a bit of a sweat. Now, as it stands, the 4 life is going to come off of the tap land anyway, because it really did need to be Fabled Passage. Otherwise, any land would do.
That was a huge draw. Like, let's do some math here.
Uh-oh, math is happening.
So that's a Brushfire Elemental. With the Fabled Passage, that becomes a 5/5, right?
Yes, with haste.
With haste. Attack with everything. You put the Ember Cleave onto it. That's 12 damage. Right? And then you have 16. That's 20 power on the board right now. I mean, I imagine Autumn's going to attack and I guess they don't have quite a lethal attack, but they have a pretty safe attack here with the Bone Crusher Giant, the Elemental, and also the Stone Coil Serpent because it has protection from multicolor.
Also curious to see if the attack necessitates Omnath blocking something.
Yeah, I think Eetu is going to have to do some Embercleave math. I think he will be able to survive in Embercleave even if he chooses not to block here.
Okay. That's really kind of the critical thing, right?
But I mean, he's still going to take 20 damage if he chooses not to block at all, right? So, I mean, he blocks Edgewall Innkeeper, he'll take 19. He'll take 19 if Embercleave goes on the Brushfire Elemental here, and then go down to 2. And okay, so he's blocking the Bone Crusher Giant here with Edgewall Innkeeper, which means, of course, the Embercleave will likely go there.
Is there any argument to putting it on the Innkeeper?
Oh, to get the Omnath off the battlefield?
Yeah, I don't know how important
that is a consideration because you can move the Embercleave.
You're getting so much damage less
losing a lot
by
of damage.
doing so. Yeah. I don't know how important the Omnath is from Autumn's perspective here. Now, we can see that Eetu has a backup copy in hand.
Yeah, I mean, it might be better to just get that Omnath off the battlefield because that leaves Eetu with nothing in play, right?
No board whatsoever. And yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen here. So let's trade board states, but look at mine. Much, much better. And even a Heart's Desire token to follow up. And now it's like, check, right? Your move, Eetu Perttula. You have to try to find a way out of what I've assembled here. A good aggressive start and an explosive turn there for Autumn Burchett. Eetu's going to kick things off with Omnath and land. And then what's the best you can do? Oh, a Brazen Borrower.
Right, so that's the issue now, because Eetu could have been at a much lower life total. Now, if Autumn wants to equip something to the Embercleave, Eetu just has kind of a clean answer here. The big window to get in for as much damage as you can was the previous turn when Eetu was completely tapped out. So this does give Eetu a little bit of breathing room, and keep in mind, Omnath does make it so that every single turn you're gaining 4 life. So if Eetu can survive this turn and resolve that escape to the wilds, I mean, he could very easily come back from this.
Interesting. I mean, we know how explosive of a turn Eetu is capable of with an Omnath on the battlefield, and we just got a chance to see at least an example of the explosive turns that Autumn's deck can produce as well. And this is going to be a good close one because Eetu is going to get to survive here and try to do something ridiculous on his turn.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like if you do want to equip something, you might want to equip the Elemental here. Mm-hmm. Or you can just choose to attack with the Bone Crusher Giant and the Stone Coil Serpent, right? Because it does have protection from multicolor. Interesting.
Yes. What is going on here?
It does have protection from multicolor, right?
It does.
I believe. Maybe you just want to keep. Maybe Autumn wanted to keep it on defense.
I wonder why.
I don't either. But Autumn is going to be able to still put a lot of pressure here still, right? You got the Lovestruck Beast coming in, Scavenging Ooze, and access to the 2 green mana to basically put another 4/4 in play.
It feels like Eetu's not going to be in a position to attack regardless. And even if he was, I mean, you've got a 5/5 blocker.
Yeah.
Well, maybe this game will reveal for us as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to find some good reasonings, but there's nothing that Eetu could have played at instant speed. I think that was probably a minor misstep there.
Okay.
I think that's just three points of damage that Autumn could have gotten in for free.
And we'll see how that pans out as we go forward. Right now, a lot of pressure on Eetu Perttula.
Yeah, he needs to spend his mana. As much as he wants to keep up Brazen Borrower bounce for the Embercleave. There's just so much pressure on the battlefield. Like he just needs to just spend all of his mana as much as he can and try to impact the board as much as he can before Autumn untaps and attacks for what looks like 20 next turn.
Yeah, now speaking of the strategic choices there from Autumn, boy, really expertly playing around Brazen Borrower there by not bothering to go with Embercleave, just getting in for the damage and then building out their board, not spending mana that would be really a major setback, right? Like you would see the Embercleave equip cost just sort of evaporate, plus the creature that it went on to would be, down an attack step. And you can see that Autumn is maneuvering through this nicely as far as that part goes. Now, though, here's the big turn from Eetu. So land and a land means that there's 4 mana floating in the pool, plus another 3 mana available to cast some.
Yeah, not a whole lot of great permanent options for Eetu to play. Can he just run at a Beanstalk Giant? That might be the best choice, right? Because that soaks up a lot of damage.
Yeah, it's an 8.
Yeah, it's an 8/8. So even if Autumn puts Embercleave onto one of these creatures, it'll still trade with that creature most likely.
Right. Yeah, we've seen Beanstalk Giant just be a good card. I know it's just power and toughness. It's kind of all it has here. I mean, okay, I should clarify. We've known it's a good card for a long time, but the Beanstalk Giant part of it, even just being a huge creature, has kind of overperformed. Standard really isn't about putting an 8/8 on the battlefield, right? Like that isn't something that you'd be interested in unless it costs you, a very small amount of mana relative to its power. But 8/8s, 9/9s, they soak up a lot of damage in matchups like this and others as well.
Yeah, as the games kind of go along, I mean, you do see this happen. People just start casting Beanstalk Giants, and because that is a natural progression of how the games go if it goes long. Additionally, you see people, when they have their wish board available to them, people do play cards like Kazul's Fury or Fling or Embercleave to finish off opponents with a gigantic Beanstalk Giant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see that a lot, even in the hands of a deck like what Eetu Perttula has. We could see the game end that way potentially. In the meantime, Autumn has decided that they do need to equip this Embercleave now that the shields are down on Eetu's side. And the question is just where?
Yeah, whatever they choose will likely be eaten up by the Beanstalk Giant. Well, that's not even necessarily true. Eetu could just choose to take it, right? He's gaining 4 life every turn.
True.
Certainly could consider taking the damage here or just going for the trade.
Stonecoil Serpent is the only card so far that's been chosen as an attacker, but Autumn is still deciding if they'd like to actually send in with anything else.
Yeah, there's really no other good attack. If Autumn attacks with anything else, Eetu's just going to put his creatures in front of the other creatures. Right.
So Stonecoil Serpent trades these, and it's an interesting decision here from Eetu's perspective because there is a 1-turn window where this is a trade. Next turn, that thing would be a 9/9 and no longer a trade, and it would actually just permanently hold back any 4-powered creature, even with the cleave on it, or you know what I mean, any total of 4 power with the cleave on it. But as it stands, Eetu says, you know what, I just need to get that thing off the battlefield. I'm going to go ahead and trade off and keep my life total high. I think that Eetu feels like if he gets time here with this Omnath on the battlefield, that he'll be able to go over the top of what Autumn's doing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, look at his hand. He's got another Escape to the Wilds in hand, right? Mm-hmm. So the moment he fires that up, I mean, it's effectively a 1-mana draw 5 here, right? He's going to play it for 5, going to put 2 lands into play. Omnath is going to give you 4 of that mana back. And then he's going to be able to not only gain 4 life, but just find a plethora of threats to just put down or answers to answer whatever Autumn has in play at this point. So
yeah, it's really funny.
Autumn was so close.
Yeah.
So close.
This one does look like it slipped away, though. That big turn from Eetu Perttula, where he was able to pass a turn with Omnath as a 4/4 on the battlefield and Petty Theft mana available. Autumn did the best that they could to not run into the Petty Theft with the Embercleave, but they weren't able to get enough damage in to really make this a game. And now the life total from Eetu has given him a massive cushion. You know, we also go back to that turn where it was the turn that Embercleave entered the battlefield. What do you equip it onto? You can put Eetu down to as low as what, 2 or 1 life, depending on how Eetu blocked. And ultimately, Autumn decided to go for the more board controlling strategy. But the second copy of Omnath here is now dominating.
Yeah, the sequence that Eetu had was basically perfect for the follow-up there, based off of what Autumn did. He had the backup Omnath into land, into petty theft to disrupt whatever Autumn was trying to do on the following turn.
Right.
So like he needed that combination of cards to really stay in it, but he had it. And now, you know, Autumn is in a good deal of trouble here. I mean, they've got a Scavenging Ooze that will get pretty big, but probably a good deal of creatures to pump it up. But I mean, Eetu is now at 21 life after all of that.
After all of that, 21 life, and now a Lucky Clover on the battlefield. You see the Bone Crusher Giant there in that exile zone for Eetu, as well perhaps as the Brazen Borrower, although that one looks like it's on an adventure. But yeah, you know, this is the type of thing where things get very precarious and could get out of hand very quickly. Here comes Scavenging Ooze, start eating things up.
Yeah, one note for the viewers who may not be as familiar here. You can tell if a creature is on an adventure based off of that shiny gold flame background that they have. If they have that, that means the creature is on an adventure, so you cannot actually cast it. Cast the adventure.
Omnath is getting in the red zone. Well, I guess that goes to show you how far ahead Eetu Perttula is at this point.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to play a backup one here. So
yeah,
just wanting to just get in for whatever damage that he can.
Omnath for days.
And if you notice there, Autumn chose not to block with Scavenging Ooze because Autumn could have blocked with Scavenging Ooze and then exiled creatures to keep it alive. But they did not want that Scavenging Ooze to die to the Bone Crusher Giant.
Right. So replacement Omnath on the battlefield now. Remember, Eetu Perttula's 4-1 in the tournament, which, by the way, is very impressive, as Eetu is one of the lesser experienced players, particularly on Arena, although Eetu's more of a Magic Online specialist. But still, not that many games played. And, you know, just like speaking to experience even in a bigger setting, we asked Eetu to share something that he learned about Historic from the Mythic Invitational. He said, I'd never played Historic before, so watching the Mythic Invitational was a great way to familiarize myself with the format. You know, so that's kind of that's where Eetu was coming in. And now, you know, first half of the day, Eetu's playing very, very, very high level Historic here, and even came away with a good record, sitting at 4-1 after 3 rounds of Historic and 2 of Standard.
Wow. So this Scavenging Ooze will get in for a lot here. There are 2 more creatures in the graveyard still, so that'll be a 9/9. Equip Embercleave, and we're talking about 20 damage. Now, with this Brushfire Elemental trigger on the stack, Eetu probably will have to fire off Stomp here with that Lucky Clover to get both of them off the battlefield. But Eetu will still be taking a lot of damage this turn.
Yeah, you know, even though this one hasn't gone super well for Autumn from this point, you still got to believe in the cleave, and that thing is capable of doing huge amounts of damage, and we're going to get a chance to see that here.
Oh, it looks like he didn't go for the Stomp.
He didn't? No mana? What's going on? No,
does he think Brazen Borrower... That Brazen Borrower, I believe, is on an adventure.
Yeah, isn't that the one that he cast earlier?
Yeah. I believe so. I wonder if this... Guess he didn't. He wasn't really going to block anything else anyways. He was going to...
This is 24 damage? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, so Scavenging Ooze can exile 2 things. Well, actually, yeah. it can get even bigger, right? Because if Eetu fires off the Stomp, that's another creature for Autumn to exile here with the Scavenging Ooze.
Yeah. And if he does, he can't kill Bone Crusher Giant, right?
Right. Is this lethal?
So he's just going to have to kill a brush fire elemental?
Well, so this is an attack for 28 damage. What? Okay, and then so even if you kill the brush fire elemental, yeah, I believe that's lethal. Did Eetu think he had petty theft available this turn?
It must be. Maybe there's something off camera. Let's find out.
Possibly.
But yeah, not taking advantage of that window to kill the brush fire elementals with the landfall trigger on the stack could prove deadly here.
Goodness.
And Autumn Burchett just about jumps out of their chair when that first one hit.
Wow.
Okay,
wow.
So yeah, it looks like Eetu Perttula maybe let one slip by there as Autumn Burchett just kept on hanging in there, finding that correct window to fire off the equip onto the biggest creature possible with Embercleave, and they got the job done somehow.
Wow.
What the heck just happened?
Eetu resolved multiple Escape to the Wilds that game. He was up so many cards.
Wow.
Could not find a Fae of Wishes to deal with the Embercleave. Had Giant Killer. But one thing that I'll note, and this is what a lot of other adventure players have been doing, which actually makes it so that this specific matchup is a lot more difficult, is people have been cutting Brazen Borrowers from their list. Brazen Borrower used to be a staple 4 of in most adventure shells, and that is a good way to kind of disrupt Embercleave, right? Every time somebody tries to slap on an Embercleave, you can bounce. But now, because we're in a world where all the creatures are 2-for-1 adventure creatures with adventure, Omnats, all these creatures that had entered a battlefield effects, all of a sudden, Brazen Borrower is much worse positioned in this tournament. And as a result, people have been shaving them, which makes sense. Which makes it so that actually, choosing a deck like Gruul, where there's a lesser chance for your opponents to bounce your creatures, actually ends up being a favorable exchange for you. So, if you look at Eetu's list, he's got 1 Giant Killer and 2 Brazen Borrowers, and he had already used one of his Brazen Borrowers. So he didn't have a lot of instant speed ways to interact with, that giant Scavenging Ooze plus the Embercleave.
Boy, that Scavenging Ooze was absurd. All right, so Autumn Burchett, very close now, just 1 game away from crossing the finish line and becoming 6-0. Eetu Perttula didn't look particularly affected by that last sequence. Yeah,
it seems like he doesn't really give much away, though. So it's hard to tell. He could be steaming inside. But
that's true. That's kind of where I was going too. I don't think he's really much to let you know.
Yeah, I mean, despite being relatively new to Arena, it said he's been playing since 2002. So no stranger to the game. He's kind of an awkward hand here for Autumn. A bit clunky.
Man, your poor Kazandu Mammoth just never gets played as a creature, Paul. So brutal.
It will have its time. It will have its time.
I'll wait.
Yeah.
So critically, we see Embercleave in hand here for Autumn Burchett, but the rest of everything else kind of needs to take a little time to form here.
Okay.
Big draw step there for Autumn. That was a sigh of relief from Autumn Burchett, finding an untapped land here. They do have Shatter Skull Smashing as well, but this is going to enable a nice little curve.
Yeah, one interesting note here is Eetu chose not to play Lucky Clover this turn. And actually just keeping up Stomp here instead.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because generally speaking, you assume that the Gruul player will be able to blow up the Lucky Charm not until turn 3.
Right.
When
You're going to need to...
Gem Razor comes online.
Right. I mean, this could be due to maybe sideboard options. Yeah, if you take a look at Autumn's sideboard, they do play 3 copies of Embereth Shieldbreaker in their sideboard. So Eetu might be trying to basically play around that.
Eetu's decided, I'm not going to leave this mana fallow here, though. Even without a Clover, I'm going to just fire off, stomp, knock you down to 15. And now go for Edgewall Innkeeper.
Yeah, but this is rough. I mean,
no land.
No land, and anytime Bone Crusher kills anything, you feel fantastic. So
right, and especially an important card like Edgewall Innkeeper. Another Gem Raiser off the top of the library here for Burchett.
And, you know, I'm not even entirely sure you can really play around, you know, like Ember Shieldbreaker. Like, Autumn's also packing 4 copies of Gem Raiser, right? Like, they're just very likely going to have that disenchant effect. I guess you could maybe try to wait till turn 4 to get some value off the Clover, but you're already kind of behind. Might just be better to just run out the Clover, and maybe the best chance you have of actually winning the game is hoping that it sticks and getting some advantages that way.
1/1 Serpent.
5/5 Serpent.
We can improve that, right? Look at this turn. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Now a 5/5, and it does, remember, get the abilities of the Serpent underneath it, including the +1/+1 counter.
Good game.
And we have good game called here?
Well, he's got nothing. I mean, is this going to be a good game into play the game out, maybe?
I guess so.
All right. Well, I mean, there's an Embercleave this turn, too. So
I would cast that card. If my opponent said good game and then played a spell and said your move,
I will say I do have a little bit of issue with this.
I'm dropping the hammer. In this case, literally.
If you GG somebody, scoop them up.
That is definitely the right way to do it, and I'll land off the top of the library, but doesn't seem to matter at this point.
Yeah, this is just a lethal attack here.
On board lethal for Autumn Burchett, advancing to 6-0 here on day one of the 2020 season grand finals, playing kind of, I don't know, rogue deck might be not the right term for it, but at least an offbeat deck. Only their team found that deck, this Gruul Adventures beatdown deck. And boy, what a start for Autumn. We've got day 9 with Autumn right now.
We didn't have to have a 6-win player. We could have ended today 5-1, but they were not content to go 5-1. Autumn Burchett, 6-0. Congratulations.
Thanks. It's great to be back.
Yeah, I just saw you. How have you been? I want to ask about game number 1, where I know you've talked about this Gruul Adventures deck wanting to go under Omnath. That was the reason you picked it, but that was an extremely tricky and long game 1. I mean, talk to me about how you navigated that situation.
So I can't actually remember the early parts of the game because I was so tense around it, but I know towards the end, there's this point where, like, I had my Embercleave turn, and it did a bit, but it didn't, like, do enough, considering my opponent was leaving mana open and gaining a life off, like, a fresh Omnath and stuff.
All the bad signs.
I realized that the only thing that mattered anymore was trying to make my Scavenging Ooze lethal with Embercleave. Because that, like, my opponent only has 2 Brazen Borrowers in his list, and has already used up 1, and has had opportunities to, like, do some Fey Wishes nonsense and hasn't, so probably doesn't have any of those. So I just need to start growing this ooze. Don't cast the Lovestruck Beast. Don't do anything else. Just make sure the ooze is big enough so that next turn it can be a 10-10, deal 20 damage. And I am amazed I won that game. There were, like, many turns where I was like, this is basically over.
I mean, it was such a nail biter. I mean, watching you play that was reminiscent of your first Mythic Championship win, where you navigated so well with that mono blue tempo. And now, with that kind of skill, you're 6-0. You're only 2 wins away from guaranteeing top 8. What is it that you're concerned about? What do you need to overcome in order to get into the top 8?
It's a good question. I think I need 2 wins to make it, right?
Yes, that is true. I can confirm that. But in terms of skill, what do you need?
So in Historic, I'm really looking to not play against the blue-white decks. I don't know how they've been doing. I find those a little scary. I do have the Ulamog in my sideboard, so maybe that matchup's a bit better than I typically expect it to be. But I know when I played against Bant earlier, I got incredibly lucky to win that match. And then in Standard, I would love to play against an Omnath ramp deck. The Omnath Adventures decks always just make for incredibly tight matches, like we saw in that game one. And like was the case in my match against Gab earlier. So if I could face some ramp decks, that would be excellent.
Well, you're going to get a lot of chances to do so because tomorrow you have 6 full rounds and only need to mark 2 wins. And I know you have a ton of fans around the world who are cheering you on, including one right here. I know. No shame in my opinions. Thanks so much for joining us, Autumn, and let's head back to the desk.
Thank you, Day 9. And super impressive, Paul. 6-0 to kick things off here for Autumn Burchett. I think Autumn's going to sleep well tonight, come back and look to seal the deal tomorrow. For now, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, though, we'll have more of the last round of action here from the 2020 season grand finals. Don't go anywhere.
I think, to be fair, despite the Ignite memories and the cruel ultimatum, my favourite memory of you is one where I wasn't even there and couldn't see it happen, which is that 2 weeks later, the very next Grand Prix on the global circuit, having been in Japan for Kyoto, is Chicago. It's Legacy. It's 1,250 players. You win that as well. Of course you do. And I remember when I heard that you'd won that tournament and just shaking my head and going, of course he did. Just crazy. And that for me is what I most associate with you, that 2-week period where it didn't matter who you were playing or what continent you were playing on or what format you were playing, you just beat everyone.
I guess I was in the zone, you know. I don't know. I guess I was playing good Magic. I don't really remember much of it. I remember a few matchups. I remember building the deck just before the tournament. I actually got the list from LSV. It was his list.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty great. It was his list. After I beat him in the finals of PD, he was gracious enough to just hand me his legacy list. And I remember, what did I remember about the tournament? I remember Paul Riesel making top 8 was black and green cards. I remember sitting down during deck registration was Mark Herberholz and Jamie Park and making a sideboard full of 1-ofs. My sideboard was 15 1-ofs because why not? You know, I was like, I didn't have high expectations. I never played Legacy.
Oh dear.
So,
yes, you monster.
My name's Aaron Gertler, 27 years old, and I come from the United States.
Christopher Leonard, 29 years old. I'm from Canada.
And welcome back to coverage here of the 2020 season grand finals. Marshall Sutcliffe with Paul Cheon. And as you can see, we've got Aaron Gertler versus Christopher Leonard all lined up in the feature here in our last round. These players coming in are 3-2 for their record, so they're looking to improve to 4-2, which might not sound super flashy at first blush, but that's actually right on track for top 8. If you can go 4-2 both days, you will be making the top 8. And of note here, Paul, we're coming into game number 3. The players have split the first 2 games, so we are in sideboarded games. Rakdos mid-range for Christopher Leonard, and Aaron Gertler has chosen, you guessed it, Omnath Adventures.
Yeah, not a big surprise to see Aaron Gertler playing Adventures. He actually was one of the first players to kind of popularize this team, the Temur Clover Shell. He actually won a DreamHack event with Temur Adventures. So has had a lot of success with this deck. And again, not surprised that he's playing it here.
All right, here's Lotus Cobra. This is one of the more explosive things that you can have on the battlefield, really just in the format. They often don't survive the turn as a result of their 1 toughness and how good they can be. Now, it doesn't do anything this turn. And yeah, it's actually may not next turn either, Paul.
Yeah, it's actually crazy that Chris doesn't really have a lot of good answers here to that Lotus Cobra. I mean, he's got that Murderous Rider, but is he going to go ahead and fire that off? No. Okay.
And he's going to be relieved because Gertler's just holding not a whole lot here.
Well, he's not going to be relieved if Gertler top decks an untapped land. I'll tell you that much.
You're right. That would be a disaster.
Yeah, this is tough. This is tough. So I mean, probably going to be taking either the Fae of Wishes here or the Escape to the Wilds, and continue sequencing out his lands. But again, really needs Aaron to kind of whiff next turn on a mana source, because if Aaron does find one, all of a sudden you're playing a card that can draw you potentially 5 cards, and cards like Escape to the Wilds is what makes this matchup so tough for the Rakdos mid-range deck. A top deck, a well-timed Escape to the Wilds is really hard to come back from, because this deck is all about kind of 1-for-1ing your opponent until you get a Crocs onto the battlefield.
All right, this is a big draw step early in game 3 here for Aaron Gertler. Can he find a land? Oh, it's another Escape to the Wilds. Now will Christopher Leonard fire off a removal spell on this Lotus Cobra? Feels inevitable. So.
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe play the Agadeem's Awakening tapped, Murderous Rider, the Lotus Cobra, to make sure that you kind of delay the Escape to the Wilds. And then on the following turn, you can, sequence something like Timur Calls the Dead into Agonizing Remorse and start slowly stripping away at the Escape to the Wilds.
Well, there's a draw step. Fertile Footsteps for Aaron Gertler at least makes another land on the battlefield, and that means that rather than being 2 steps away, Aaron's just 1 step away from starting to cast those Escape to the Wilds, and they really do chain into each other nicely too. You're going to have plenty of lands after you resolve the first one. So another big draw step coming up for Gertler soon. And Christopher Leonard's going to have an easy decision if he goes for Agonizing Remorse here.
Yeah, well, actually, you know what? There's really not even a point to play Agonizing Remorse here, right? Because you have your opponent has 2 copies of Escape to the Wilds. You might be better off just kind of adding to the battlefield here and just playing Mire Triton into Timur Calls the Dead. And kind of set yourself up nicely so that you mill a bunch of cards and try to hit a Croxa and play that on the following turn.
Well, good news. That's exactly what happened here. Croxa in the battlefield.
Oh, no.
Lucky Clover doesn't look so lucky here, though, as these cards are just coming in the wrong order here for Gertler, who would much prefer to just draw a land in that position.
Yeah, and now, I mean, Chris can just run out of Croxa here, get one of those Escape to the Wilds, and if Aaron doesn't find a land here, he's going to be in a ton of trouble. Even if he does find a land, right? Chris is at least going to be able to attack with that Croxa for 1 turn.
Interesting decision point now for Leonard. He had some of these kind of just lined up, but he did draw Shredded Sails for the turn, and I don't know how concerned he is with the Lucky Clover, but he may be tempted to get off the battlefield as well.
I mean, the thing is, 2 of the cards in Aaron's hand. right?
Right.
You're playing a numbers game. There's only one card left. Sure, it could be a Giant Slayer, but I think this is the turn where you just kind of go for the Croxa and just try to seal the deal, because Aaron might be able to come back with all these Escape to the Wilds.
Well, one of them is going to get taken by Agonizing Remorse. And I guess that just means that Chris is going to have to settle for
he's going to kill
killing
the Clover.
Yeah. It's a similar result, right?
Cheeky attack. Yeah, but then I don't even know if I really like this attack. Like, do you really want to? Does the 2 point of damage really matter that much? Now, what if Aaron Gertler top decks Beanstalk Giant, right? And right. 2 cards here off the Lucky Clover.
Well, again, this particular Clover, very unlucky.
Yeah.
It has not brought any luck to Aaron Gertler, as it's just an Edgewall Innkeeper off the top of the library. He's just going to run it out onto the battlefield. But Aaron has really not been able to do the thing he wanted to do at any point after the first couple of turns. I keep going back to that one turn, Paul, where an untapped land with the Lotus Cobra would have given access to Escape to the Wilds, and this game would play out completely differently than it has.
Yeah, now Aaron is in a world of trouble because Leonard was able to find land number 6, meaning he can basically do all the things. He can return Croxa, get one of those Escape to the Wilds out of Aaron Gertler's hand, and cast Shredding Sails to get rid of that Lucky Clover.
All right, there it goes. Escape to the Wilds number 2 in the bin. There's only one left in hand. There's a land now for Christopher. And there's Shredded Sails to kill the Lucky Clover.
Giant Killer, maybe? Do you want a Giant Killer here off the top?
Sure.
That'll buy you some time. If it's not an untapped land, that's the thing that I want. In fact, I might even... Oh, no.
God. It's a Triome, and you see Aaron kind of go, really?
Yep. Yeah,
really?
And now he's going to have to discard the Escape.
And he feels like that is going to give him no more outs to try to win this game. The problem for him, that was game number 3. Christopher Leonard picks up the victory. Really great job there by Christopher to get the job done. He also had some interesting sequencing decisions there, Paul. Both players faced with not quite being able to do everything they wanted every turn, but really it was Aaron who just was able to do almost nothing for too many turns in a row.
Yeah, just every single draw step, it was probably the worst possible card you could draw, right? You're stuck on 4 lands. Oh, another Escape to the Wilds. I mean, and just games like that will happen. You know, that is one of the key cards in the matchup. If you can resolve an Escape to the Wilds and not fall too far behind a Croxa or something like that, that's how you can beat the Teamer Adventures deck. But, you know, the desk has already kind of spoken to how this deck's been performing. Not especially good against these various Omnath shells. Where the deck really shines is against other creature decks. So what the Rakdos decks really want to play against are those Gruul decks that are at the top of the standings.
That's right. So if they can hang in there, they'll be bumping into them as we work our way forward. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we will have a little bit more from round 6 here. Don't go anywhere.
How did you get into the game?
So back when I was about 12, I think, I was playing some chess, some video games, and a friend of mine told me, "Oh, let's go play decks." So he taught me what he thought the game was. It's not exactly Magic, or like if you play with that the set of rules he gave me, that would have been something very different. But somehow we started playing. Where 3 of us, like him, another friend, and myself. So we played a little bit with our cards, with like all the comments that the place had for us.
Yeah.
And we played at home, and I felt like this game was good, but it was missing something, and the something was the actual rules. So then I went back to that place. I was just like around the corner from where I lived, and I learned how to play the game for real. And yeah, that from then on, I never really stopped playing. I was really competitive, like where that was like for chess, for video games. I hated losing. Young players, I was like beating them, and I was like feeling good about that, and I felt the competitor
right
there. So as soon as I started playing Magic and there were tournaments out there, like, yeah, well, I'm gonna play. And of course, when you're 12 and everybody's like 18, 20, 25, and they have all the cards, you're playing with like 8 hogs and no artifacts in your deck, you know, you're gonna have a hard time winning. But it took me a little bit to, you know, get to that part, like by a little bit. It would probably be like a couple of months. Now it would be like more years, but there was a long time for me back then when I was 12.
I'm Gabriel Nassif, I'm 36, and I'm from France.
I'm Seth Manfield, I'm 30 years old, and I'm from the United States.
And welcome back to coverage here of the 2020 season grand finals. This is going to be our last game of the day. We've got 2 very heavy hitters, Gabriel Nassif and Seth Manfield, 2 Hall of Famers, 2 Pro Tour champions, and they are going to play it out here in the 3rd and deciding game. These players, by the way, are 4-1 coming in, a really great record in a small field like this. Whoever wins this match is going to be ahead of the curve for top 8. Whoever loses this match is still on pace for top 8. So this is truly, the top of the tables and the top of the skills here. We've got Nassif on Omnath Adventures, and Manfield has his Rogue Dimir Rogues deck lined up here as well. Although, it does play out a little bit more like a controlling version, Paul, rather than like a pure Rogues, tribal deck.
Yeah. He doesn't have all the payoff cards. He's basically only playing with the 8 rogues, and those are the rogues that basically allow him to fill up his opponent's graveyard so that he can get the kind of some of the payoff spells that he has in his deck. Most importantly, into the story.
Right, into the stories, his big late game push, draw 4 for only 4 mana once you get 7 cards in your opponent's yard. Also, he's playing a card that I think caught everybody's eye when it first was released, but hasn't yet to find like a really great home, which is Vantress Gargoyle, which pulls double duty. It allows him to get cards into his opponent's yard, and in some cases his as well, when it matters. And then also, he can just win the game with the thing. It's a 5/4 with flying that you don't have to invest very much mana in, and it can close out a game very quickly.
Yeah, the thing that you've seen with other versions of the Rogue decks is, it plays a bunch of 1-mana 1/1s that don't really do a whole lot. Mm-hmm. And basically what Seth decided was, look, I'm not going to play any of those cards where in the late game it just doesn't do anything. So I'm only going to play the cards that basically allow me to get to my end game, right? This Soaring Thought Thief allows me to mill my opponent on a consistent basis. Also, if my opponent has 8 cards, it's still a pretty solid 2-mana 2 flyer, right? Additionally, the Thieves Guild Enforcer also is just a 1-mana 3/2 death touch creature in the late game. So, that's a very relevant bot.
Speaking of, there is Thieves Guild Enforcer hitting the battlefield right now, as it looks like Nassif is going for Bone Crusher Giant. And there's Drown in the Lock as well. So kind of a good 1-2 there from Seth Manfield, who finds into the story.
Into the story, and we're getting pretty close. Ooh, but this is a tech card that Gabriel Nassif's team is actually playing in their sideboard.
Yeah, Chainweb Arachnir.
Yeah, because they were slightly afraid of, the Rogue deck, they decided to actually use 2 very precious sideboard slots, mind you, in this deck because it has a Wish sideboard, but they're playing 2 copies of Chainweb Arachnir in their sideboard specifically for this matchup.
Yeah, it does really good work. You can escape it from your yard. It ends up being a 4/5 on the battlefield, and it does 4 damage to a creature with flying. So you could see how that would be great in this situation. Also keeping in mind that if Seth isn't able to pile a bunch of cards into the graveyard for Nassif, and I mean like a ton of them, then when you escape cards, it takes them out of the yard and makes it harder for Seth to get back up to like casting into the story. Now, as it stands, it looks like he has been able to put a significant number of cards in the yard, and he has into the story online right now. In fact, we have to know that he's got 7 cards in his yard, there, because Seth can do into the story, but his Thought Thief was not yet turned on. So there you go.
And that is a big part of why that Arachneer is extremely powerful. I mean, of course, it is great at being able to just ping flyers, get flyers off the battlefield. But as you mentioned, getting cards out of your graveyard is huge here.
All right, into the story now for Seth Manfield. He recognizes that he won't have a window to cast it. And if the Chainweb Arachneer gets to do its escape thing, then those cards just go away as part of the cost and you don't get to respond. Here's Omnath, though, for Gabriel Nassif, but Mystical Dispute is going to shut it down.
Yeah, Nassif was going for the home run play there. Go for the Omnath, play Fabled Passage, and then followed that up with another play. But because, you know, Seth had basically the one card to deal with the Omnath, all of a sudden, Gabriel's basically entire turn got negated there. And now Seth gets to untap after being able to refill his hand with that into the story.
Yeah, another thing to keep in mind here as a possible side note is, you know, Seth right now doesn't have any way to actually win the game, right? He doesn't have any board state going. That won't be a problem for him, but it really is. The pressure's on Gabriel Nassif to win the game on his side because, as we've seen before, his clock has gotten a bit low. It's at about 3 minutes and 20 seconds here. Now, that's plenty of time, right? You can, like, Nassif can definitely put together a win in that time frame, but it will gradually add more and more pressure to the decisions that Nassif has to make and to the fact that things need to stick on the board or he's going to end up losing. And it looks like Lofty Denial is going to snipe a Fertile Footsteps here, and that is brutal for Gabriel Nassif. He would have much rather had that, I think. And if he would have played him in the other order, it would have worked out much better for him.
Oh, yeah. Seth looking very, very solid here. He's got that Lurrus in hand. He's got multiple negates, which does a really good job of just countering adventures.
Last turn, Manfield had put Lurrus of the Dream Den in hand, and now he's going to put it onto the battlefield and then cast a Thieves Guild Enforcer. That's 2 of those on the battlefield now, which means 4 cards get milled away. Also, no flyers right now, so the Chainweb Arachneer doesn't get to actually kill anything straight up.
Yeah, and Seth is really happy with the trade because he's got that Lurrus in play. If he trades anything with that Thieves Guild Enforcer, he can just replay it next turn. And now, I mean, there's a Chainweb Arachneer, but there's no flyers. There's no targets to actually kill. So this is just another body that Nassif could put onto the battlefield. And Seth doesn't really have, you know, he doesn't have an answer, but I don't think it's a big deal here either.
Right, and, you know, I wouldn't actually be shocked to see a block here from Seth Manfield. He actually wants that card in his graveyard.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that just helped.
Yeah, so now he's going to replay it.
And then he gets to play the other one, yeah.
Yeah, mill Nassif for 4, and then he's got 2 more Soaring Thought Thieves in hand that can mill him for an additional 8 cards.
And he still gets to just keep attacking with the Thieves Guild Enforcer, and he's gotten Nassif in this awkward loop where now he's blocking with the Arachneer, but then he kind of commits himself to playing it again next turn, and it's a card that Seth Manfield doesn't particularly care about. It's a mana problem now for Gabriel Nassif to go on top of his clock problem.
Yeah, Nassif is in a lot of trouble. The thing is, all of his answers, Seth has 2 negates for the answers that Nassif can have for that Lurrus, which is highly, highly problematic here. So, and Nassif is extremely far away from, you know, stringing together 2 more removal spells here to try to get that Lurrus off the battlefield. So Seth, I mean, is beating Gabriel and Nassif in like multiple different angles here, right? He's got the mill angle here, but he can also just whittle Nassif's life total down here, and Nassif sitting at 2 minutes on the clock.
There's another Chainweb Arachneer going into the Adventure Zone, and that's not bad. But as you can see, Manfield playing it patiently here, making sure he has the 2 copies of the Thieves Guild Enforcer down before he deploys any of his Soaring Thought Thieves. And if those start to come down, I mean, he is going to be able to mill Nassif out. Nassif's at 20 cards left, I believe, in his library right now. And that is going to go very, very quickly the way that Seth's hand goes. Yeah, trade.
Yeah.
He can just get the thing back with Lurrus again.
Yeah, just definitely getting negated.
There's negate from Manfield, and I think that's going to lock it up here. I don't see a way out for Nassif at this point.
Yeah, I mean, he's got another 4 or 5 here, but But at this point, I mean, Seth just kind of has that Lurrus engine going.
Oh boy, he even drew another into the story in case he ever runs out of action, but he's certainly not going to here. And there we go. Soaring Thought Thief. Down to 12 cards left in library for Nassif, and there's another Soaring Thought Thief. So that's going to do that. And remember,
this is 10 cards.
It's actually 12. There's 2 Soaring Thought Thieves. So yeah, you're right, 10 cards, and that's plenty enough to get the job done. And wow, Seth Manfield defeats Nassif. Now again, I'll remind you, if you're a Yellow Hat fan, he's doing just fine. He's going to end the day at 4-2, and he's going to be okay. But Manfield? What in the world? He always wins, even when he takes a deck that literally nobody else in the whole field is playing.
Yeah, and he was playing with a team, and he was the only one that chose to play this deck. But again, I mean, can't really be surprised that Seth is doing well. I mean, you can never, ever count Seth out. And what's funny is his only loss in the entire tournament was to a deck that was basically unexpected, right? He came here to beat Omnath Adventures, and so far he's doing a fantastic job of doing so.
All right, well, great job in the booth today, Paul. That's going to do it for us here. But with news and updates from our friends at the desk, here's Riley.